Well, good morning, everyone. I hope the conference has been fun for you all. I'm Richard Owen. I'm the Chief Executive at Satmetrix. Here to talk to you about what's billed as the new currency of competitive companies. And I'd like to start with a quote from one of my favorite authors, William Gibson, who says that the future is already here, and it's not necessarily evenly distributed. So you may have missed, but last night Target reported their results. And the stock, I think, this morning was down about 15%, which was the biggest drop that the company had experienced since it went public in around 1974. The uneven distribution of success in business today is accelerating. And it's easy to pick on the sort of Amazon-Target comparison, or for that matter, Amazon and just about any retailer, because it's very transparent, but it's part of a general trend you see in businesses where the uneven distribution of success is accelerating. And businesses that would have taken 50 or 100 years to have gone out of business or seen a transformation in their industry are seeing it within a matter of a few short years. And some of that's to do with a fundamental change in how business is done that is really only just starting to catch up with reality. So let me start with a premise that I'm hoping in the 15 minutes or 13 minutes, 40 seconds I have left, I can persuade you of. 15 years ago, we constructed a methodology called the Net Promoter Score. It was a result of research my colleagues and I had done over the space of 5 or 6 years. And it was based around one very simple premise, the idea that businesses grew almost entirely as a consequence of a slither of their customers, hopefully a big slither, of their customers that acted in a very different fashion than all their other customers. These were customers that seemed to propel the business forward financially, versus just about every other customer they had that charitably was a break-even investment and potentially was actually a losing investment for the business. Since then, about 5,000 companies have worked with us on this methodology. And I can say that, to some degree, it's been a little bit of a disappointment. In 15 years, I think we persuaded people that they should take customers seriously, but we've not really persuaded them that to get with what is a contemporary view of how they can really impact their customer experience. And the premises I'm going to suggest today really based around 3 ideas. The first idea is that the winners over the next decade are companies that understand how to capitalize on data assets. And that's not just a matter of accumulation of data, it's a matter of an ability to actually capitalize on it. And that's tricky. That's not as simple as it sounds. The second premise is that you need an organizing premise for that customer data. You can generate an awful lot of data, but it's not really useful or effective if you don't have some way of structuring it. And we're all struggling to deal with the massive amount of information we have, whether it's data exhaust from customers or information we collect through surveys or usage data. We're struggling to find frameworks that we can put that in to help us make decisions. And I'm going to suggest that the easiest framework is simply thinking about it through the lens of the customer journey, although I'd also add that that is challenging for businesses in that it fundamentally upends the way they think about their operations. Because since really the 1950s, we've thought of businesses as functional silos, and the customer journey is not an easy organizational structure. And the third premise I'd like to suggest is that your biggest challenge in any company is trying to find a way to get your employees engaged in it. Oh, and I know everybody is enthused about customer experience and committed, but for you to improve customer experience, you have to upset some apple carts. And whenever you upset apple carts, you're going to face a lot of resistance internally. And the bigger the company, the bigger the challenge. But let me get back to driving for show. If customer experience is the new currency, why is it that companies spend far more money, for example, on advertising than they do on customer experience? And I think this is a reflection of really an old doctrine as to how people grew businesses as opposed to a new one. You know, and it really starts with, well, I could have actually added Don Peppers here as an original advertiser. But this is David Ogilvy, who really founded a lot of modern advertising. And if you think that when John Wanamaker said 50% of your marketing budget is wasted, he was being conservative, Ogilvy estimated that no more than 20% of advertising spend had any impact on anything. I would respectfully argue that advertising is a tax on your business. You're advertising because you can't find a better way to grow your company. But we're doing a lot of it, and it continues to grow. Companies that have customers who advertise for them don't need to spend all this money. And so you can really look at yourself as being taxed on your inability to get your customers to advocate for you. And if you think that's a purely hypothetical construct, consider that companies like Starbucks grew their entire business really without advertising. And so there are different ways of going forward, and I would respectfully suggest that this is the idea of growing a business simply through your ability of your customers to promote your business to others. The research we did with Bain & Company, and this is now dated some 10 years ago, told us that only 8% of companies agree with management's position that their company delivers a better differentiated value or proposition. So we are very severely disconnected with what our customers actually think. What was interesting is that 8% of companies have a vastly superior economic profile, both in their lifetime value and also their overall economics. Those 8% of companies are more profitable, lower cost to serve, they grow faster, and over 10 years of data, that's never changed. Industry by industry, if you can be one of the winner's circle of companies whose customers strongly agree with the idea that you have a differential and superior experience, it doesn't guarantee success financially, but not being in that group makes it statistically very, very unlikely that you'll be successful. Well, what is LTV? Well, at one level, it's tempting to think of it as a formula. There'll be a test at the end of this presentation. But it's really more of a concept. We all understand what lifetime value is. It's really a philosophy. It's really the idea that you don't make money when you sell something to somebody. You only make money over time. And that's the new currency. And customer journeys are the way to think about the new currency. Now, McKinsey's done some fantastic work around this, and I'm going to shamelessly plagiarize from them. And there's two big ideas around organizing this vast amount of data that you can build around customer journeys. The first is the most simple, which is that customers think of their experience with you as a journey. They don't think of their experience with you as a particular single event with a single function. So if you're going to orientate the optimal customer experience, might as well orientate it around the customer journey. The challenge with that is it forces us to eliminate our dependence on optimizing every single touch point. And what I mean by that is we can no longer worry about whether we're good at tech support. We can no longer wonder if we're good at retail. We can no longer be concerned if we're good at web. The customer may not care about any of those things. We have to orientate what we're good at around the different customer segments. It's a global optimization as opposed to a local optimization problem. We're trying to figure out how to make the whole end-to-end piece work instead of making each subsection work. And that's much more challenging for us because it means we have to organize our data views around this customer view as distinct from around these different functional views. And you've got 30 years of management training that says, go and fix every one of these individual components, even when some of these components may not matter. I very much suspect that Target's drop in performance wasn't directly attributed to the performance of their contact center. Maybe they're very good at contact centers. It just doesn't matter to their customers. But if it's a challenge for us to organize our data around these different views of our business, and I caution everybody that different customer segments often have radically different views around what matters in the customer experience, that actually could be the easiest bit. Figuring out how customers perceive us through the journey is often a lot easier than trying to figure how to actually get people to do anything about it. And human behavior is stubbornly resistant to change. A lot of the best work done on human behavior and incentives is down the road at Stanford with this fellow Fogg. And one of the observations he's made here is that ultimately you have to make things easy. If people find it hard to do things, they won't do it. We can lecture all we want. We can persuade people all we want. We can provide financial incentives as much as we'd like. But if it's hard to do, people just won't do it. If you look at businesses and how they make decisions today, this is borne out by how companies actually think about decisions. This is data from the Economist Intelligence Unit, and it shows when they asked executives, how did the company make major strategic decisions? People started with saying, well, we just talked about it internally. My next big source was my own experience. I relied on my gut, which is particularly ineffective in very volatile or dynamic markets. Bad news for the consulting firms. Unfortunately, I apologize in advance, only 4% of them went to consultants. You could see this as a particularly good opportunity for you. You got very low market share. Financial indicators, but only 30% relied on data and analysis. In 2017, does it strike you that 30% of decisions being made around data sounds like the right ratio? These are the winners, and the most likely result is that this chart needs to change dramatically over the next 10 or 20 years in order to favor database decision making. Now, one of the problems, and I'm not here to solve it for you, I'm actually not here to solve any problems for you, but I'm going to give you lots of challenges, is that you're not going to be able to find enough data scientists and analysts. There aren't enough data-fluent people in the universe today available to hire to solve all these problems. The other challenge is that people find this very, very hard. So this is a complicated graph. This is what I mean by very, very hard. You're all going to find this very, very hard. What it basically says is, we like the idea of people moving from this traditional gut feel, siloed-based view, the non-journey view. We like the idea of people moving it up to this real-time decision-making, simulations, Elon Musk simulations. Half of you in this room are, in fact, simulations. We like that idea, but people can't deal with the complexity. It's simply too much data, it's too complex. We've got to simplify it for people. And if you think about what's going to actually increase people's engagement in this environment of massive data complexity, well, this is going to sound odd, but information frequency is really important. Habit. Motivation's an obvious one. Probably not financial motivation, I hasten to add. People's ability, that's fairly obvious as well. Triggers. How many of you respond only to things that get triggered on your smartphone? That's a rhetorical question. I hope it's true. And ultimately, systems and processes. We're in an era where people respond to information and processes. So to increase engagement, we have to find data sources that conform to this and organize them around the journey. Sounds straightforward, right? And so companies are progressing through this over time. They start by understanding data about told them what happened. You've probably seen this chart before. They try and move into diagnosis where they understand why it happened. And they ultimately want to move into a predictive model as to what happened. So it's an evolution of capability. So I'm going to finish up in 55 seconds with what I started with. Bit of a rushed presentation, I'll admit, but the biggest challenge we all have today, the separation of the winners and losers in many ways, is about data capital. Can companies build enough data assets for them to be successful? I would argue respectfully that Target versus Amazon is competition around data assets on a balance sheet that's invisible. One company has those data assets, the other doesn't. The winner is the company that accrues most of the data assets. In the context of customer experience, they need to organize those data assets. I believe the best organizing principle is around customer journeys. But to do that, it requires a rethink about how people organize their activity around it. It's not a siloed approach. It becomes very much driven around a sort of optimization by customer segment. And that's just a different way of thinking. And finally, those challenges are going to pale in significance compared to the need to engage the entire organization. And that is as much about simplifying these ideas so that powerful data can be brought to bear for everybody as it is about motivating them. Enjoy the conference. Thank you very much.